The Hulu original series, Furious, is coming to Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus July 27th.
There are 3 victims we know of. The suspect is female, white, late 20s.
Female serial killer.
Kill for power, control. I believe there's a deeper motivation here.
You have no idea who you're dealing with, and you are going to end up dead.
I've been waiting for you.
Watch the Hulu original series, Furious, on July 27th. Streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
Determined to make the rest of summer the best of summer? LL Bean has clothing and gear designed to do it all. Like sun-washed apparel that feels broken in from the start. Rainwear for every surprise rainstorm. Hand-sewn boat shoes. And of course, the iconic boat and tote. Made right here in Maine to carry all your summer essentials since 1944. LL Bean. Be an outsider. Visit llbean.com to learn more.
Amazon Health AI presents Painful Thoughts.
I can't stop scratching my downtown. Yeah, but I'm not itching to go downtown and tell a receptionist I'm here to talk about my downtown. Some things you'd rather type than say out loud.
There's no question too embarrassing for Amazon Health AI. Chat your symptoms and get virtual care 24/7. Healthcare just got less painful.
Welcome back to DOCUFILES. I'm Paige.
And I'm Natalie.
Next week, we are going to watch Scamanda on Hulu. So we're finally switching it up platform-wise. So that'll be exciting. I did also listen to that podcast. So definitely excited to be watching that and joining the chat with all of our listeners about Scamanda for next week. Of course, today we are going to talk about Hell Camp Teen Nightmare, which is from 2023 and a true crime documentary that explores something Natalie and I have explored a few times on our different segments now, which is wilderness therapy camps.
That term is really said loosely. Therapy. There isn't much therapizing going on in these camps. But this documentary focuses on a specific wilderness therapy camp or program founded by Steve Cardisano. And his specific camp is a 63-day 500-mile hike through the deserts of Utah. Things eventually do turn deadly at some points because of the lack of infrastructure in place for these programs, the lack of actual therapy happening, the lack of safety going on. It just
the lack
all
of
around.
regulation.
Yeah, it truly does turn disastrous. And unfortunately, that doesn't even stop Steve Cardisano from continuing on with these. He finds other avenues to be a villain in other people's stories. So we're going to talk all about that.
He finds not one, not two, but 3 different forms of these camps under different names because as nefarious things happen due to, honestly, conditions of essentially neglect and abuse.
All types of abuse.
All types of abuse, physical, emotional, mental, and
sexual.
And sexual. What is so disgusting is that this whole time too is he's kind of touting himself on talk shows, talking about the Challenger Foundation, which is really one of the central camps and foundations that are discussed in Hell Camp, and his, should we call it, flagship?
I was going to say, yeah,
honest.
That would be the perfect descriptor of it. It's the flagship of all of his programs that he puts together.
He opened it in 1988. And again, these talk shows played such a huge role in his marketing. So of course, immediately as a viewer, you're questioning, do you really believe all of this stuff that you are again touting about helping troubled teens and families and basically scaring families into believing that their kids are going to get in with the wrong crowd. Like this is literally said, and they're going to end up letting these other kids from the wrong crowd into your home. They're going to corrupt your child. They're going to steal your jewelry. They're scared these parents into you had one fight with your kid, or they're pushing back a little bit, which is completely normal as a teenager. Send them off to therapy camp.
Well, and ironically, Steve Cardisano couldn't prevent that from happening in his own home twice, because not only did it happen with his son, who eventually came under the spell of heroin and, fell into the wrong crowd from the early age of 13. But his daughter followed suit, and now she is clean. She's been clean for over a decade and a half. But she talks about how she befriended her brother's friends and ran with that same crowd where they would steal the TV. Like the mom would come home and the TV would be gone, or the snowblower would be gone. And it's like Steve Cardizano started these programs to whip other people's kids into shape. And he couldn't even keep his own kids in line. They were rebelling. I mean, he did eventually, we'll probably dive into it a little bit more, but like he did send his son into this program. He didn't send his daughter. But I don't know that he fully disagreed with his tactics, but I think he even knew that what he was doing wasn't right.
What's so sad about that is he started this whole idea. He didn't just start a foundation that does this. He started this whole idea. He is the reason that you would turn on Dr. Phil, and he was sending people to therapy camps that, may have been pretty similar to this. He had like some ranch he would send people to. I haven't heard too much about whether or not there was abuse in those specific therapy camps, but at the end of the day, this guy is the reason that therapy camps for teens exist that, as Natalie was mentioning, don't have the regulation probably or oversight that they should, to the point where sheriffs were basically told like, yeah, you're not going to come like anywhere near, but then they're getting, calls and having to finally show up on site and being horrified at what was going on.
The U.S. Embassy had to get involved in one of Steve Cardizano's programs at one point. That just shows how much they were trying to skirt any sort of law enforcement and regulation. But I do want to point out, before we get into a few more of the specifics, that this documentary really does capture other people's experiences with these wilderness treatment programs that were very similar to what Paris Hilton experienced. And we touched on her experiences in I think it was titled Unscripted at the time, but it would be probably equivalent to our Tragic Hollywood episodes nowadays.
We encouraged listeners to watch her documentary where she discusses her experience and her advocacy against therapy camps.
And I think a lot of people probably hear Paris Hilton's name and go, oh, okay, so like the tall blonde from the early 2000s and the DJ, or the heiress that had all the money at her fingertips that she could ever want. She was born with a silver spoon in her mouth. But someone made a comment in Hell Camp documentary that said, if this could happen to Paris Hilton, it could happen to anyone. And it does happen to anyone. And I think that's something that is so troubling, is that these programs are really like these great equalizers. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter who you are. You're going to be subjected to probably the most traumatic time in your life for a lot of people. And a lot of people that were interviewed for this documentary talk about how difficult it is to revisit these memories, how difficult it is to know that there's this cloud of uncertainty of when you're going to leave. They don't tell you when you leave. They tell you leave when you're ready to leave, but there's no definitive exit plan. And some kids end up being there for a year, 18 months. And one girl even says, like, I never thought anyone would come for me because no one cared about me.
You mentioned how they didn't often know like how long they were going to be there. They barely knew where they were going. They barely knew that who was kidnapping them in the middle of the night was a safe person. We, of course, want the survivors that are involved to tell you themselves through this documentary, which is the point of why we watch these documentaries first, or like promote watching them first, so those survivor stories and voices are their own. But she mentions, Nadine, that they finally asked her, oh, don't you want to, like, where you're going, like where we're taking you? And she just said no, because she was just like so scared.
Right. Well, she also didn't want to give them that power of like, oh, right, like I need these answers.
That just struck to me, though, that they hadn't said one word and they've already landed, like, not one word of like, and we're here to take you to, a program. You'll get more information later. Like, not a lick. It's just two big burly dudes coming and taking someone in the night, just like they did to Paris, like, and so many of these other survivors. And again, there are a lot of documentaries and things out there like Paris's documentary that will give more amplification to their own private voice.
That forced transport really does add to the level of trauma that these kids experience. Like you said, it's these big burly dudes that come literally ripping the covers off of you in the night, taking you out of your bed. In a day and age when we have rampant human trafficking, I can't imagine what these young people thought was happening to them. The fact that they weren't just sent away to this camp by their parents, but
in a way, it almost is a traffic situation because these adult people like Steve are making money off the fact that these families are paying to send their kid away. And you called it the great equalizer, and it is. We have a mom who sold her house to send her child, but then we have somebody like the Hiltons who it was basically like spending $50 to send them there. I mean, they're spending tens of thousands of dollars, from $10,000 to $50,000, and each one of Steve's programs, by the way, got more and more expensive.
of course they did, because he had a taste of the high life and he wanted to continue to maintain that. And he also found himself intermingled with several lawsuits, and he had to pay for those. But just, I want to bring up something that I want us to think about, not that I'm looking for an answer, but if this is a therapy program and it starts with probably the most terrifying moment of these young people's lives, can it be truly called treatment? That's what I want us to think about, because I don't know how you go back from that. Like, these kids ranged from those with substance use abuse issues to what someone called couch potatoes. There was really this range of what was happening in these young kids' lives and why their parents decided to take them. But they all had one thing in common, and that was this forced transport, this newly formed trauma. They had to sort of work through what had just happened to them while doing physical labor, living in the wilderness with no tent, no sleeping bag, on the hard rocks, on the dirt. Steve would even think like, yes, this will help turn them around. Or, you know what I mean? Steve or any of the adults that we've mentioned.
We meet one of those adults named Horsehair, an older gentleman with his oxygen tank who seemed to truly believe in what he was doing.
Yeah. I think he still believes in it.
Thought they were helping. Yeah. And that is great. Like, thank goodness there were some people who at least thought they were helping, and maybe Steve honestly did too or not. I don't know, and I don't care, because he was clearly gross and exploiting an industry that is extreme trauma. And he's also not here. He passed in 2019. I'm remembering a quote from Steve too, where he basically says like, yeah, they're going to be dirty. Yeah, they're going to be tired. Like, he didn't care. He was doing that so many silent gen and older boomers were taught and believed in. So it's not necessarily lost on me that it completely makes sense that someone in his generation would create such a space that unfortunately ended up being completely awful. And then back to Horsehair, whose name is Lance. He says, I'm going to read it right off my iPad here. So if you're watching on YouTube, you will see me reading. We weren't punishing anyone. There are consequences, both good and bad, for our actions. You determine whether it's a positive or negative consequence. I don't think that I don't think that the kids got to choose that at all. Do you?
No. I mean, like we said, they're literally deprived of almost everything. They're doing long hikes. They're in this extreme weather. They have minimal food, sleep. They're sleep deprived. They're isolated from their entire community, whether that's their family, their friends, the place that they are familiar with. They have no other opportunity but to survive. Like, that's what they're doing.
Adults are administering said consequence. So to say you decide, it's like sometimes deciding for these kids was, if you don't keep walking on this 500-mile trek through the desert, then you're not going to eat or you're going to get hit. So you can either walk or you can choose a bad consequence. It's like, I can't choose to walk. My feet are bleeding.
If data management is slowing down your business, you need the Intuit ERP. If one entity is here and one here and one here and one here, you need the Intuit ERP. If scaling your business feels like starting over, you need the Intuit ERP. Intuit Enterprise Suite is the AI-native ERP solution that consolidates, migrates, and automates, all in one place. Learn more at intuit.com/ERP.
Choice Hotels get you more of what you value. Comfort Inn, it's calling your name. Save on the stay. Oh, and free waffles are yours to claim. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Ever wonder where Tropicana got its name? The tropics. And every time you enjoy a glass, you're not just drinking juice, you're taking a trip. Stepping into sunshine and embarking on a flavorful journey into the tropics where ripe fruit is crafted into wildly delicious juice. And the best part? No passport required. Tropicana. Give life some juice.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
Yeah, I think also a lot of times there was this uncertainty for the kids of what would be punished and what wouldn't be. So say you gave someone else your food because you didn't want it or you felt like they needed it more than you. You both would be punished and not given any more food because of that. There were consequences that didn't make sense. Like if someone is asking for someone else's food and they're willing to give it to them, they obviously needed it. But now both of you are not going to be fed. So the consequences don't always match the actions. Like the dragging of that kid where he was eventually taken to the ER and found to be emaciated and have multiple contusions all along his back and legs and head and neck. I mean, it doesn't make sense. This kid can't walk. So you're going to drag him and injure him further?
That story was so horrific. All of these stories that were shared by the survivors were horrific. And I thank them if any of them happened to catch this, since it was a documentary that they were part of. Thank you for sharing, because a lot of them share their story so that it doesn't happen to other kids. They are, like Paris Hilton, amplifying their voices, advocating against these camps. You're mentioning the survivor who ended up in the hospital, and the parents were horrified. Another parent had to sneak their kid out of the jungle.
In Samoa.
Yep, wherever they were in the jungle, because they went a couple of different places. And then, unfortunately, another family in the desert at the Challenger Foundation, the beginning camp, if you will, the flagship camp, they lost their daughter. Essentially, in my opinion, murder, because she was not taken care of. That was a preventable death that was due to neglect. And the mom's pain that she felt, she would have never sent her daughter if she knew that would happen. These parents saw clean-cut Steve, and they thought that they were just sending their kid to somewhere where it would be kind of some hard knocks, some tough love, a reset, a reflective moment with proper therapy. I don't even know what credentials these people had to therapize children. Like, that needs to be in question too.
They didn't have any credentials, and I think what they did have was the power of the tongue. They had an ability to manipulate parents who were left without solutions with what they considered to be troubled teens. These people, Steve, put together a pamphlet where he was able to describe to parents what he was going to do with their son or daughter that was out of control. And these parents looked at Steve as a problem solver rather than a therapist. And he said, yeah, I'll take your problem. And I think a lot of the parents, whether they want to admit it or not, were looking for a way out of the situation they had found themselves in with their kid, which is so sad.
We have to understand, too, these are boomer and silent gen parents working with boomer and silent gen individuals who did experience corporal punishment at home and in school. They were allowed to get hit in school in the 50s, 60s, probably into the 70s. You know, we really didn't get rid of that until like probably so late that it's embarrassing. So they were hit with wooden paddles that had holes in them at school by the principal or whatever. And for that reason, I think that it was something they were able to kind of, I don't even know what to say, like filter and categorize in their mind, kind of excuse.
Yeah, I don't want it to sound like it is an excuse. I don't think that they sent their kids to Steve knowing the full extent of what was going to happen. I think what you're trying to say, at least this is what I'm getting, is that they understood that tough love was needed in situations like they had found, the ones they had found themselves in. But
it's what they knew, and so it
was familiar to them.
That there's going to be some tough stuff, but right, not to the point of somebody's collapsing and dying or being dragged and ending up in the hospital.
Yeah. I don't know. It was really tough to watch. I feel like I say that with a lot of the documentaries that we screen for DOCUFILES. It was tough to see because we were able to get clips of what it was like, a few snippets for these children. And I say children because most of them were under 18. There were a few 18-year-olds that were still forced to stay there, by the way. It's hard to watch these children screamed at in their faces by a grown man, like whatever his name was.
Horsehair,
Wild Horse.
It's hard
to... Yeah. And the irony of him sitting there with his oxygen mask, being interviewed for this documentary, saying that...
Kind of defending it.
Yeah, well, he said he still believes in corporal punishment. I guess when you're that deep in it, there's no room left for self-reflection. And it's been so long, he's able to separate himself from what he did in the past to now.
You know what it's giving? It's giving spankings, not hitting.
Well, and it's giving no accountability,
And it's giving no accountability.
You know who was not holding anyone accountable? Steve's daughter that was interviewed in this documentary. That was shocking to me because she was literally sitting on her bed giving an interview to the production team, saying how she was so upset about the way that her father was painted in the public, because after this young girl died in his program, he was taken to court. He faced charges because of that. And she said something along the lines of, I don't know why people thought, she said something along the lines of, and he wasn't even there, which was shocking to me. He may not have been physically there, but he built this program. He is the one that recruited all of the employees. He's the one that recruited all of the children that were in the program.
He's the one that called for struggle, trial, and diversity on shows like Phil Donahue, which LOL at all the Phil Donahue clips. I was really transported back into the 80s and 90s. But wow, you know, he called for that. Your dad called for that. And you're sitting there basically defending him.
You're also part of the family that benefited financially from all the children that were sent to these programs. Your mom was riding horses and buying horses. You were living a life of luxury at the expense of these children literally doing slave labor.
So much so that any time one of these camps, we mentioned at least 3 in this documentary. There's the desert, a cruise of sorts, and then there was
You call it a cruise.
That's what they were like pretending, right? It was like some like therapy.
It was like this catamaran where you were trapped on a ship for like months at a time, a boat even. It was very small.
Like, did they even have sunscreen? I don't know.
Probably not.
Probably not. And they can't sue for future skin cancer. Like, these are the things I think about when I'm watching these things. And then they end up having like a jungle one, and that was like the last one. He kept pivoting, and she had the audacity, the daughter that you were just talking about, to talk about how like as soon as something exploded, then it felt like they like lost all their money, right? And it's like, yeah, they were living so lavishly that they couldn't withstand a pivot, when in reality they were making so much money that, like, of course financial hardship is not fun, but like they probably could have survived a little bit better, like if they weren't living the way they were. He bought huge mansions, he would rent Lamborghinis, he would fly helicopters to the campsites. It's like, why don't you hike the 500 miles to your campers? How about that? He definitely got too big too fast, by the way. Like, it just took off, and I think that didn't allow for him to learn the things he needed to learn and to get things in order. But I mean, come on, by the 3rd camp, there's no excuse. So that's not excusing him. One of the survivors mentioned something that really struck, because I just watched this on Netflix as well. Lord of the Flies. She mentions that it was basically like Lord of the Flies, where they were, you know, creating their own hierarchy and government kind of thing, and probably fighting and probably feeling like it's a bit of anarchy, so to speak, but like trying to organize through that, whatever that meant to her. But it really hit, because a lot of us have read that book and or at least seen the new limited series on Netflix.
Yeah, it was one of the required books, I think in middle school or junior high for me.
Somewhere in that time frame in the curriculum. Hearing that from a survivor really made me feel like, of course, he ended up with these charges of child neglect and abuse. Let me check my notes again. It was 9 counts of abuse and negligent homicide after the 1990 death of Kristen, who was part of the Challenger program.
Right. She died of external heat stroke while hiking this 500-mile hike in extreme weather conditions.
It was gross that it got acquitted.
It was gross that he was acquitted. Kristen died of external heat stroke while on this strenuous hike in extreme heat conditions. We're talking 90s hundreds, whether that was in around that range. I can't believe that it was the first time that it happened in one of these programs because it just was so physically demanding. I wanted to know a little bit more about the physical demands of this program that the documentary talks about. And I stumbled across a Reddit thread where someone posted saying that they just watched the documentary. They have a lot of questions. And there was a commenter who responded saying that they were a part of the program in 1990. And this is what they posted. I do want to point out that, yes, anybody can post what they want on the internet. They don't have to tell the truth. But what this person has to say feels really true to what we heard about the program. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a read. Timely Aardvark 2083 wrote, I went to the Challenger program in 90. I was there when the death happened. I remember it clear as if it happened yesterday. This documentary didn't really hit on how much abuse happened there. It was fucking crazy how abusive it was. One memory of abuse that I can't shake no matter what is of this boy who was stripped naked and made to lay in the burning hot sand for many hours. He was screaming because the sand was hot like lava. The counselors just laughed at him and kept screaming at him to shut the fuck up or it would get worse. I remember when he finally got up, he had blisters and welts all over his body. Then the next day on the hike, his backpack was packed full of massive rocks. He couldn't even lift it. This all stemmed from him taking some rice from the other kids. We were only fed rice and lentils. We got a baggie of rice and a baggie of lentils every so often, I believe every 2 or 3 weeks, I can't remember. We had to ration them, and if we ran out of them before the next batch came, too fucking bad. We had no food to eat. It was no joke. We were all so sick and emaciated. I was one of the kids who was pulled out by the federal government and taken to Salt Lake City to talk to the prosecuting attorneys. We all showed up filthy, starved, hair matted, ripped clothes, smelling of the landfill. It was bad. They had us each talk to them separately and spill the beans, and let me tell you, we did. We let it all out. The owner and counselors were shitting bricks. The owner, Steve, was an absolute monster. He was a true Jekyll and Hyde, nice to parents' faces because he wanted their money, and a monster to the children. It is a good thing he is dead. He needed to be stopped. I watched this documentary with my 20-year-old daughter today. She had no clue that I ever went to something like this because I never talk about it. She was shocked to say the least. It is a memory that I have locked away because it's so traumatic. After I got home from Challenger, I never spoke of the experience. I never talked to my parents about it because I guess I assumed they knew what they paid all that money for. Surely they had to know corporal punishment was part of the deal. I do know that any of the letters that any of us wrote home were read before they got sent out. If there was any mention of what was really happening, the staff threw them out. All our mail coming to us was read by the staff. We also kept journals while we were there. It's almost done. When they were ready to be mailed home, we'd give them to the staff to be mailed home. Not one of mine ever got mailed home. I remember when I got home, that was the first thing I asked my mom for. She said she never received any of my journals. I had written everything down in those journals daily. I told everything that happened, and I guess they didn't want my folks knowing of all the abuse. I could go on, but I won't. I will say that yes, everyone who worked there was Mormon. I believe their faith was a big piece of the puzzle.
That Reddit post gave me absolute chills. Thank you again to another survivor for telling their story. What it also made me think about when they called Steve a monster, it reminded me how many people tried to stop him and how he got these at least 3 camps started. And the dad who had no idea, because they talk about this too, like I assumed my parents knew what they were getting into or why would they have sent me, which we kind of discussed, like maybe they didn't exactly know, but they had some like tough love ideas. It made me think about how that dad that arrived to see his son in the jungle and was floored whips out this is so harrowing. He whips out the video camera and starts recording all of these kids and kind of interviewing them, and he's trying to be stealth with it.
Yeah, he's trying to be covert.
Yeah, and he is leaving, and Steve called and told the government, like and the airport or whoever it was that he made contact with, do not let so-and-so leave with this briefcase they have that has the video in it, or with this video. He knew there was a video, there was a briefcase the video was in. This dad is so smart because, Steve, you're charging a lot of money, and a lot of these campers are going to have parents that have higher paying jobs. Many of them. We mentioned parents who had to sell their house to do it, but a lot of these parents are going to have resources like video cameras, etc. And he's so smart. He tells one of the airline people that comes up to him because he's waiting to get on that plane, and they locate him, they come and they talk to him. They're like, hey, do you have XYZ? And they're like, I already mailed it to the US. Meanwhile, it's in their briefcase the whole time that they have it. And they thought they weren't going to be able to get it back to the US. And thank God they did, because that was a big catalyst in ending that jungle camp because they had the proof.
The story of that parent going to the U.S. Embassy and having to smuggle that videotape out really shows that even these parents who paid for their kids to be here and involved in these programs, that they didn't have much power once they had sent their kids away. And it shows how vulnerable not only the kids were, but the parents were. And so it, to me, shows how much power Steve and these programs had in the end. And I'm glad that they were able to get in touch with the U.S. Embassy and finally put an end to at least Steve's programs. Obviously, we know that there are plenty of other programs that are similar that have cropped up over the years, and people like Paris Hilton are continuing their battle through the legal system, trying to get laws put in place to either end them or at least get them more monitored. It's something that we'll have to keep watching to see where it ends up.
It seems it's very specific to like mid to late Gen X through millennials, and it's even touched older Gen Z, but I definitely hope that there is a downturn of this type of therapy and that we can turn these types of teen therapy into something less abusive and productive. Thank you to all of the victims and the survivors again that shared their story in this documentary, because without them, this documentary absolutely would not have happened.
Be sure to follow us on social media at the Murder Diaries Pod. We're on YouTube, where you're hopefully watching this, Instagram, and TikTok.
Until our next episode, you can find us on Thursday with a true crime case that needs your attention, Monday with our Tragic Hollywood segment, and again next week on Tuesday, another DOCUFILES, where we will be watching Scamanda on Hulu. Thanks so much for being here. Bye.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Evening. Buyer's remorse. Buy a new car? I'll be moving in. Let's get started.
Sorry, I think there's been a mistake. I bought it from Carvana.
You what?
Yeah, great price. I even have 7 days to love it or return it.
So there's no...
No buyer's remorse. More like buyer's rejoice.
I guess I'll let myself out. Congratulations. I mean it.
Buyer's rejoice. Buy your car today on Carvana.
Limitations and exclusions may apply. See our 7-day return policy at Carvana.com.
At ZocDoc, we know being a healthy adult is like living in a video game. Every day has side quests, taxes, laundry, birthdays. And just when you're leveling up, you have to book a doctor. The insurance portal crashes. They put you on hold. Your doctor doesn't take your plan. Game over. We see you. So we made booking a doctor easy. Download ZocDoc. Search by specialty, insurance, and availability. Book instantly. No cheat codes required. Find a doctor you love with ZocDoc.